What's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode. Finally got somebody I've been trying to get on here for a while and really looking forward to this. Welcome to the show, Randy.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So Randy Sullivan and I actually went to high school semi together.
Kind of. Pretty close.
I went to school with your wife, but I think you graduated the year before I moved here because you're 96, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I moved here in 96. So
when we first met, there was this whole name mishap because there was somebody else that had similar name to you that I knew, and you're like, hey, and then I was like, were you there when I got hooked through the ear when I was a kid? And you're like, no, that's not the one that I am. And I was like, okay, I still love you though. You know, like we've got the common roots, even though that wasn't the story.
Exactly. The colony is very, very small. So usually you're only off by a little.
Only a little.
Well, thank you for coming on the show today. And let's just kind of tell everybody a little bit about what you do and a little bit about your background. For those that don't actually know you, a lot of people on here probably know you a little bit on my following.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of overlap of friend group for sure. So I'm Randall, but I go by Randy Sullivan, and I co-founded the local, well, it's technically a national, but mostly local Facebook-based whiskey group, Some Would Say Whiskey, and I got into whiskey education, doing lives inside the local whiskey community, developed that into a podcast called Bourbon Real Talk. And Bourbon Real Talk now it's largest on YouTube, but as of today, we're almost 44,000 or 45,000 subscribers.
That's so awesome.
And we've got a large community associated with that, also on Facebook, Bourbon Real Talk community. But my original thing was I was a real estate agent. So I've practiced real estate in North Texas since 2008. Started a funding company that does funding for real estate transactions. And then also the podcast led to the opportunity to start a couple of whiskey brands, the Prideful Goat and Unallocated. And all of that comes along with philanthropy. So I started the 501c3 Live Stay Project as a suicide prevention awareness program. So those are all of the things that I'm involved with. So.
Yeah, I don't even know how you possibly make time for all this. Just running a bourbon group alone, let alone a podcast on top of being a realtor is mind-blowing. And you're quite the family man too, so having time and making time for your family as well it's mind-blowing to me. I mean, you've given me a lot of great advice. I mean, you've helped me a tremendous amount when I had questions as I was getting into doing my podcast. I think it's absolutely amazing you have that many followers on YouTube. YouTube has been the hardest for me to get any traction on. I mean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Facebook, all getting great traction and moving on. Instagram, same thing. iHeartRadio, all those moving very rapidly, but man, getting to the first 100 followers on YouTube is a tremendous undertaking.
I like to joke that if you are a content creator, Facebook is like a crack whore that'll do anything for $20. YouTube is like the it girl that everybody wants to date.
Yeah.
And she's very selective, and you have to put in work and prove yourself before you even get a chance, right?
Yeah.
And it was a year and a half of nothing, and then it was December 17th, 2020. I remember it like yesterday. I pulled up my numbers, and I had 700 views that day, and normally 150 would be, a lot, unless I just released a special episode. And it was, like a Tuesday or something. And then the next day it was like 2,500. And the next day it was like 4,000. And the next day it was like 7. And then it went up to 19,000. And that was when I broke through the algorithm and never looked back. There are times where YouTube turns me off and my views go back down. But, now we probably average, in a slow month, we average at least 5,000 a day, which was unthinkable for the first year and a half, And good days we'll get up there in the 15,000-20,000 range. So
that's awesome. I think I happened to be going to one of your pours with friends.
Yeah, pick up with pours.
Up with pours that Saturday after it happened, because I remember I got there a little early because we had a mutual friend of ours that we both were. That you ended up having him show up and kind of surprised me. It was cool because I hadn't seen him in a long time. It's my best friend's little brother. It's one of your best friends.
Right.
So that was really cool. And I remember you telling me, you're like, you got to see this. Look at this. Like, it just jumped. Yeah. Like, I'm almost having a panic attack because it's doing crazy things that it's never done before.
Right.
That was a really cool moment. Like, I can relate a little bit now. I haven't had one happen like that yet to that degree, but like that's really awesome.
You just got to stay the course.
Yeah.
I did somebody else's podcast the other day, and they're in the same space as me. They're focused on YouTube, and it was before he started recording, and he's like, "I'm sorry, I'm just a little bit starstruck." And I said, "Bro, I'm you, just 4 years ahead. Like, yeah. I'm not special. I don't have any special skills." There's nothing about this that's, it's just you stay the course and eventually it works out. So,
yeah, but there's a lot of up and downs with it. I mean, I know personally just from conversations you and I've had, like, people really will beat you up, attack you, everything else on there. And hopefully, do you think that Someone Say Whiskey and all that you went through of setting that group up, like, helped prepare you more for that? Or was it still just a learning process because both got different types of things happening in those platforms?
It made it harder, I would say. So, a lot of people don't think about this, but if you're a content creator, you can't promote yourself without presenting yourself as a source of novel information, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the basic purpose of a podcast.
Yeah.
Right? You have to communicate a vision. And the people that hear the vision, you want to communicate to them, if you are interested in this type of novel idea, I am your source. But when you start to do those types of things, and there are people that have been in and around your life before you started doing the podcast, there will be large quantities, nearly 100% of those people will go, well, who do you think you are? And why should I listen to you? Yeah. I mean, we've been hanging out and going to lunch and all that stuff, so why all of a sudden are you the authority that I'm supposed to go to on this subject? And, I think that if your heart is right, you didn't set out to make it that way, right? Yeah. You just had a passion and you wanted to share information or whatever. But because of my involvement with Someone Say Whiskey, it actually put a lot of extra pressure on me. Because there were all of those people from the whiskey enthusiast world that were having those negative feelings towards me because they felt like I was trying to communicate to them that I was somehow superior, that I knew more. And that leaked over into Someone Say Whiskey, and people started putting pressure on the rest of the leadership team to get rid of me because all of a sudden I was toxic. All of a sudden I was a problem. And there were people who no longer wanted to be actively involved in Someone Say Whiskey because I was still there and I was involved. Yeah. And luckily, Rodney Smith, we co-founded Someone Say Whiskey together. He never turned his back on me. Yeah. And he just tell people, like, if you can't be involved while Randy's here, then maybe this isn't the place for you. Yeah. And but he also gave me very honest and painful to hear feedback. And I had to make a lot of changes in my life. A lot of changes. Especially in interacting in group settings. I had to be very cautious about what I said and how I said it. I had to change some very fundamental things about my nature and struggled hard. Developed an anxiety disorder. Now I worry so much about how I'm making other people feel whenever I'm in public setting that I can actually have a panic attack and have to leave. Yeah. And I didn't have that before I started the podcast. But people see me on video and I'm like, hey, look at me, and I'm doing all this stuff. And then if I go, oh, well, I actually have social anxiety, they don't believe me. They think that I'm saying that to try and...
It's hard to fathom because, like right now we've got a camera on X amount of people are watching this, could be watching this, or going to see this now, later, in the future. whatever. But you don't, when you're here in the moment and doing this, it's like irrelevant because it's like there's nobody else in this room other than you, me, and Biz.
Right.
So it kind of takes that away a little bit, I think. But I can totally understand what you're saying too, because then when you get in a crowd, I've started to experience this within my day job, that I go to a trade show or some kind of socializing event, and people are coming up to me and like, tell me more about the podcast. Like, oh, I saw this, like, explain this to me. And how do you know this person? How do you do this? Right. And it starts to become a lot, you know, like,
right.
And you get that. So I can see where a lot of that will transition, and especially the bigger it gets and the more it grows.
And you don't want to let anybody down, you know?
No.
And you want to encourage the people that are supporting you. But sometimes people have kind of a spirit of entitlement, you know? So for you have a lot of celebrities on, and people see you hanging out with the celebrities, and then they'll go, hey, I want you to make sure that I get to hang out with these people.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
And now you've got this whole other thing where you're glad that they support you and that they're paying attention and all that stuff, but you understand, like, your access can get cut off if you don't handle these situations right?
Exactly.
And so it puts so much pressure on you. And for me, you know, you have to find your space, in who you want to be and how you want to do it. And I tried everything. You know, my original intent wasn't to be a whiskey education podcast. That wasn't my original intent. My original intent was, years ago, I saw what's that dark beer from Ireland that everyone drinks?
Guinness?
Guinness. Yeah, it was Guinness. I saw Guinness did this thing where they would get two people.
I know the commercial you're talking about. Yeah.
I don't know that it was a commercial. It was like a YouTube series or something.
Yeah.
And they would get two people from totally different walks of life that would normally hate each other.
Yeah, or hate.
And they'd get them together, and they would give them Guinness and give them kind of topics to talk about, and slowly would reveal to each other, like, the thing that I hold most dear, you hate, right?
Yeah.
And the most interesting thing about it was that over drinks, they had already gotten to know, like, oh, this person's got a family and all they want is for their kids to be happy and healthy and all that stuff. And it took away a lot of the vitriol that we see in the discourse today, right?
Yeah.
And me, I'm so naive. I thought, like, I want to do that every week, right? Like, I'm gonna have people on, you know, and the friend that you mentioned, which is Philip Robertson.
Yep.
He is quite a bit younger than me, but I knew him from growing up. I knew his brother. He worked for me for a little bit, and we were workout partners. And it was actually Colin Kaepernick. When Colin Kaepernick started kneeling, you know, and like, you know, Philip, if you're listening to this, I am a 45-year-old, like, white male Protestant, right? Like, I don't get it, right?
Yep.
so I'd go to Philip, who we worked out every day, and when we were doing, you know, our cardio, I'd be like, hey, can you explain this stuff to me? Like, I'm trying to understand.
Break it down for me.
And so having those conversations, I thought, what if we could facilitate this, like, on a mass level? I think it could be very entertaining, but it could also be very beneficial for people to get to know each other. And that was my original intent. But what I discovered very quickly was that if I had somebody to come on and talk about, you know, Black Lives Matter and their struggle with law enforcement, everybody who struggled with law enforcement wants to watch it, but people who are Back the Blue supporters don't want to watch it.
Yeah.
Right? And so I wasn't reaching the audience that I want. And I did try the celebrity route for a little bit, and I didn't have the connections that you have. And so I wasn't able to get the right people on and all that stuff. But eventually I realized that whiskey itself draws people together. And that if I can get people connected to whiskey, the whiskey will do the rest of the job and get people connected together. And so now I have this massive network of whiskey enthusiasts that know me because of the podcast. And we have done an awful lot to to foster that connected like nature around whiskey to the point that, you know, we are for sure stopping suicides. We are for sure bringing people together. We're pulling people off the brink. You know, that all of those things are happening. And when you say like, oh, I have a whiskey podcast and I do suicide prevention, people are like, what? That doesn't make any sense, right? Like, people who are struggling with mental health should not drink whiskey at all because it's definitely makes things worse. And I'm like, well, yeah, but, you know, fish like worms, so I put them on hooks. You know, you bring them in and you might hit them with another message. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it might be the thing that they need to hear. And so, you know, my podcast is very much about, you know, mental health, connectedness, teaching people that you can find somebody who has a ideological difference that you think you can't get over. And if you talk about the right things for long enough, you'll learn to love each other. And then those other things don't mean as much.
Yeah. I mean, kind of what you were saying, though. I mean, you talked about that I have a lot of celebrities on here. And yeah, I do. I have had several celebrities on here, former pro athletes, stuff like that. I think some of the best advice you and one or two other people gave me was, you're going to go into this thinking this is what you want to do to some degree. Mm-hmm. And you're going to have that kind of narrowed down at the time. But as it grows and as you grow at doing podcasts, that's going to evolve and change. And what you start out doing in year one might not be what you're doing by, you know, year 2 or 3, or even sooner possibly.
Right.
So I've always kept that in the back of my mind, and I try to. It started for me with just being in the lounge and being around different people, and kind of the same thing. It's, you know, I didn't know a lot about cigars, but I liked cigars. And when I came in here, I knew a lot about whiskey. You know, I was 2-3 years into my bourbon journey, hardcore, and I found out that I could trade bourbon knowledge for cigar knowledge.
Right.
And it made an easy little transition there. And when I started doing that, you know, I had obviously, I mean, at the time, I had listened to probably every single one of your podcasts. You know, like I get ate up with podcasts. I drive a lot, and I would listen to stuff and just consume it and learn. And
I'm sorry about that. Some of those were not good.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, but I mean, like, I've heard it from the beginning. I mean, I harassed Rodney about that before he came on the show. I was like, man, when I went back and did my research, like, it was really funny to watch that first time you and Randy sat down, knowing the two of you as well as I know you now, even as well as you guys knew each other then, the comfort level and the flow and the vibe and everything. I was like, man, you guys need to go back and redo that at some point, because I bet it would be a completely different show and come across completely differently.
Sure.
So, you know, just watching those things and watching those things evolve, I think is cool. But I did the same thing. It's like when I got at ICC and the family environment that they create here, and industrial has this real openness. And, you know, it's a lot like Someone Say Whiskey. You know, if you go to other cigar lounges, it's probably not going to be the same. I mean, I haven't found many that have the same culture. But, like, the
very
culture.
cliquey.
Yeah, and the culture of Someone Say Whiskey, you know, from the get-go was, you know, amongst all the different bourbon groups, and there's tons of them. And I used to get jokingly called Switzerland because I was in all of them, and I didn't get involved in any of the drama or politics that you and I both know come along with all that crap. So seeing that and watching that and then seeing what they created here, it was very similar to Someone Say Whiskey, which I think one of the reasons, too, you guys very early on partnered up with the Franks and did a lot of things with the Franks.
Sure.
You know, in industrial cigar. But when you watch that as a whole and saw it all come together, I was sharing bourbon knowledge, they're sharing cigar knowledge with me. And then as soon as you sit down, and you're sitting down with people from all walks of life, all different backgrounds and whatnot, and the minute you guys sit down and start having a drink together and have a cigar, all the other bullshit in the world doesn't really matter.
Right.
And, you know, you start having genuine conversation, building genuine relationships, friendships, and such. And it got to the point where I'm hearing all these amazing stories and I'm learning stuff and I'm building relationships. And I'm like, wow, how many other people would benefit from being a part of this conversation?
For sure.
And that's where I started the podcast and was like, we got to do this. You know, not all of us drink, not all of us smoke cigars. You know, like you're not smoking a cigar today. Had Ken Hamlin on a while back, and he doesn't drink. So we drank coffee. That sucked for me, drinking coffee till 8 o'clock at night, because I was lit like a Christmas tree all damn night. And I came home, my wife's like, would you just drink next time? Because when you drink and you come home, you're done. You came home tonight and you're like twitching out, and you're just like, why? They're like, yeah, I don't normally drink coffee that late. Like, it's a little much for me.
Am I allowed to cuss?
Yeah, we're full blown. You can say whatever you want.
Yeah.
Really.
Hell yeah.
All right, good. Yeah, so when I had Ken on my podcast, I was an asshole and drank while he did not. So, but it was funny. I went down to Houston. There's a cigar lounge that is kind of, I think it's kind of his home. That's where he hangs out, and that's where I tried to interview him. I didn't have my producer with me, and there were mirrors everywhere. I did not know what to do with my lights. It was not a good situation. So if anybody goes up and looks up the Ken Hamlin interview on Bourbon Real Talk, I apologize for the video, but I did the best I could. But what I realized while I was there is that there's a lot of crossover in the connective nature of nicotine and ethanol, right?
Yeah.
They're both intoxicants. And, you know, this is a weird thing to say, but there are anthropologists that have researched the use of intoxicants in human culture. It goes back somewhere between 9,000 and 12,000 years. And it's important. It's important, right? Mm-hmm. And I read this book. It was called Drunk, and how we, dance, drank, and something ourselves into civilization. Very fascinating book. Very interesting researcher. And what he explains is that, if you are just a scientist, don't mean to offend any religious people, but if you're just a scientist and you're looking at evolutionary development, right? If we did a Survivor show and one of the contestants was a chimpanzee, who would win? The chimp, hands down, no question. But if you took 250 chimps and you put them on a 747 and tried to fly them across the country, do you know what you would find inside the plane when they landed? A bunch of blood and gore.
Yeah.
Because they don't know how to socialize and interact with strangers, even from their own species. And these intoxicants have historically been one of the binding forces that allows us, even though we have a suspicious nature, even though there are parts of our brain that its entire purpose is to prevent us from getting ourselves into risky situations with other members of even our own society. And these intoxicants bring us together. And so historically, there's not a lot of examples of treaties and, major business deals and things like that where there weren't, alcohol and other intoxicants involved, because we need those things to relax our prefrontal cortex, which causes us to be suspicious of these types of relationships.
Yeah.
And opens ourselves up to these connections. And so I think that there's a scientific reason behind why the, cigar community and the whiskey community have a lot of things in common. And the reality is that the reason why humans are so successful evolutionarily is because we are able to work together. And part of the reason why we're able to work together is because we share this thing that relaxes us so that we can calm down and get to know each other. Yeah. And learn that we do have common interests and we are working towards a common goal.
Set down some barriers.
Right, yeah. And so I think cigars are very interesting in that nature. I think that, whiskey, alcohol in general is very interesting in that nature. And there's something to be said for somebody who wants to help others connect you can do it. You can do it through cigars. You can do it through whiskey, right?
Yeah.
You bring them in, you create the opportunity, you create the environment, and this stuff takes care of the rest.
What drives your passion to do all these things? Because you are involved in so much. Like, what really drives you to take on so many things? My
brother's suicide.
Fair.
So I had a younger brother, Sean Sullivan. He worked in sales.
Army guy, right?
Yeah, he worked in sales, and after 9/11, I remember like yesterday, I was at work, and he was working at weight loss center, Jenny Craig. He worked at Jenny Craig, and before this happened, we were hanging out, and he was like, "Man, my job's kind of sad." I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Well, they have these scripts, and they teach us how to, take these people, and most of them, like, they just went to their doctor, and their doctor said, you're not gonna see your daughter's marriage because you're gonna die soon if you don't lose weight." Like, that's their motivation. Like, they are in a broken place.
Yeah.
And my company teaches me how to use these scripts to emotionally manipulate them so they'll sign up for this program. And if they follow it, it'll work. But a lot of them don't have the willpower. There's
not
other
in the right
factors
place.
in place and all that. He's like, I just feel weird. But his Jenny Craig office that he worked at was right next to a recruiting office. And 9/11 happened. And brother's patriotism kicked in, started talking to the recruiter, and I remember he called me and he said, I'm going to join the Army. And, this is, post, 9/11. So I was like, you understand that if you do this, and I'm not telling you shouldn't, but you understand you will go to war, you will see active combat,
yeah,
and you are going to kill other human beings. That's going to be your job.
Yeah.
And if you feel okay with that, I'm like, I'll support you no matter what you choose, but you need to understand what you're signing up for. And he ended up joining the Army. He was airborne infantry, and I think he was 82nd Airborne. And ironically, he never was actively deployed. He got sent to a training facility in Fort Polk, Louisiana, where he actually played the role of a terrorist. And they would bring in all of these troops that were about to be deployed, and it was my brother's job to kill them. And he'd hide in the woods and try not to get caught, and they had to learn how to catch the terrorists and all that. And I think it messed him up, but when he got out, he had some injuries, typical story. VA docs, here, opioids.
Yeah.
He was addicted. He got out. He immediately went to rehab. It didn't take. He stayed on the opioids, developed, alcohol abuse disorder, trying to make the opioids, stretch. Couldn't keep a job. Didn't come out with skills like, how to work on a truck or a plane or anything like that. Couldn't keep a sales job. Everything was straight commission, and he was so whacked out all the time. It never really worked out. And in 2014, he shot himself. And I was pretty deep into my real estate career at that point. I'd been full time in real estate since late 2010, and I wanted to find a way to help people who maybe were feeling the way that my brother did. And and I realized, after his suicide at his memorial, all of his friends came up to me one at a time at his memorial. They didn't want to hear. They didn't want anyone else to hear him talking. And they would pull me aside, and they would all tell me the story about the last time that they spent time with him.
Yeah.
And the stories all had a similar, vibe, which was they invited him to a group setting. He behaved badly, and they asked him to stop making it weird for everyone. He couldn't, and then they stopped hanging out with him.
Yeah.
Right? And then they would apologize for killing him. And I'm like, you did not do this. And you're not the only one who has told me this story tonight, right?
Yeah.
Like, you need to understand this is a choice that he made. This isn't your responsibility. But what that made me realize was that my brother probably felt very disconnected from the world around him at the point that he made that decision, because he had driven everybody out of his life.
Yeah.
But what would happen if we created some sort of a process to take people who are feeling that way and we plug them into a connected community of so many people that they couldn't feel alone?
Yeah.
Right? And so that's kind of been my motivation. That having been said, like, I could have done all that without starting the Prideful Goat. I'm also an entrepreneur, and I don't like to work for free. And I want to make money, and I want to have a nice life for me and my family. And so when opportunities present themselves, I pursue it. I don't turn my back on those things, because I'm not an idiot. And if you expect me to do that, or you want me to somehow admit that my passion for my brother's suicide is fake because I'm also making money off of the Prideful Goat, then maybe I'm not for you, right?
Yeah.
But, I only have so many hours in the day, and I spend them all on this. And I have multiple reasons why I do it, but the impetus, keep in mind, I made no money off of the podcast for years. And
it's tough, and you
the
refuse.
podcast is just now not losing money.
Yeah. I mean, you refuse to take on sponsors and stuff like that.
I didn't have any sponsors. I didn't have a Patreon. I didn't have any of those things.
Yeah.
Because I didn't feel like I had given enough to ask for that.
Yeah.
I hadn't earned it, right?
Yeah.
But, my efforts have raised well over $100,000 for nonprofits that serve veterans, children with cancer, things like that, right?
Yeah.
I'm at a place now where, like, if somebody wants to come along and go, like, you're a fraud, I go, cool, I'm not for you. Go on.
Yeah.
Right? But there was a long time where I didn't feel comfortable. And so I monetized YouTube as soon as I could, but, my first few months I made $50, right? My base production cost for my podcast is astronomical,
Hey, man, I understand. Like, I'm in the same boat. I had my first show sponsored recently, and I just got our first sponsor. So I totally understand that. Like, it's a tough place to be in, and obviously it shows what your passion is, because a lot of us do this because we feel a calling to do it, or a desire to do it, or it feels something for us as well. And I wanted to make sure we told that story. It's the same reason I don't have a sign-off legitimately, because your sign-off has affected me so much that I'm so cognizant of it. And it's real. It's passionate. It's you. I mean, I know you. And when you do your sign-off every time, I'm like, and it's one of the first things my little brother said to me when I told him I was doing a podcast, and he listened to the first episode, and he was like, you need a sign-off. And I was like, yeah, man, maybe that'll come at some point.
It'll come.
And Randy told me, like, let this things like just evolve naturally and come in, but I'm not going to do that. And maybe someday I will, but right now I don't, because your sign-off is so powerful and so meaningful that I was like, I can't touch that. That's like trying to do a Joe Rogan or a Dave Chappelle skit and like bring something to that. Like, you can't do some of those things.
But I will chime in and say, you're not Randy.
Right.
Randy has his own North Star, his own path, his own being.
Exactly.
Yours is still developing. It's going to come.
Exactly.
I've been a photographer forever, and early on in my photography career, I was so busy comparing myself to other photographers and styles and looks. And then when people started hiring for the way that I do photography, I realized that this is my lane, embrace it. But it took forever to get there, and I'm still growing and evolving in that.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
this is too. It's the same way. But just listening to what you just said about your brother, and then how you said you didn't take sponsors and everything because you felt like you have not arrived at the place to take that on, that speaks volumes. So even though you're thoroughly impressed by his sign-off and everything, yours is coming.
Oh, I know it is.
Oh,
I
for sure.
wanted to say that just, if anybody's listening to Randy's podcast, he signs it off the same way every time. And it's meaningful, it's heartfelt, and it's driven by his purpose. And that's why I wanted him to talk a little bit about his purpose, because I just feel it's important. Everybody finding their purpose and why they do something.
That's hard.
It's hard.
I'm still looking for
super
mine.
hard.
Clarity and a North Star to find a path, because your life evolves so fast and everything around you does. And it'd be great to have blinders on, but it's like if I don't have a fork in the road, I got like 10 million of them.
Yeah.
Which one do you follow?
But it also pisses me off that people would even call this man a fraud or take certain issues with him and what he's done. I'm just saying, me personally, as your friend and as somebody else, like it kind of makes me mad and it frustrates me. And I was like, God, I hope I don't have to deal with that.
But he's grown beyond that.
No, but
So
I know he has.
I still cry sometimes.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, it kind of makes me mad because like he's done these things and like he's done it out of his own pocket. But yeah, he's been blessed with a lot of things as well, and like he's done well for himself in a lot of different avenues. But for people to attack the man and say he's a fraud when he's pouring his heart out like that, and
People are your
sharing his
friends.
passion.
People are your friends until you either stop doing for them or you don't do it their way.
For sure.
Now
For
all of a
sure.
sudden they're critics, and that word entitlement that you used, man, it's horrible these days.
Yeah.
I mean, COVID really brung out everybody's true, whatever you want to call it, or maybe they're just saying, but I thought kids were entitled. They got to learn it from somewhere.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and I'll say, I should go back and do the research to see when I started doing my sign off, but I mean, it wasn't in the first year. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing it's somewhere around episode 75-ish. We're almost at 200. And what happened was, I'm doing the podcast, and my wife said, I say that. My sign off, I'm going to do the full sign off at the end.
Okay.
And so if you're listening and you want to hear the sign off that was inspiring to him, then keep listening. Don't click off. But the very end of my sign off, I always say, if you woke up this morning and you were unsure whether or not anyone loved you, just know that I love you.
Yeah.
Right? That's the very end of my sign off. And my wife said to me at some point, because I was saying that, she's like, they don't know why you're saying that. That sounds insane to a stranger.
Yeah.
Right? They think you're crazy.
There's no backstory.
Right? They think you're insane for telling you, or for you telling them that you love them. And you need to explain every episode why you love them.
Yeah.
And that's when I changed my sign off to what it is today, and I've never changed it since.
See, Lindsay, you are super interesting and you have great ideas.
Exactly. Hey, all wives out there listening to this, your husband thinks you're amazing way more than you do. All right? Like,
For sure.
stop discounting yourself and just accept the fact that man's love is 100% pure. So same thing, right? My wife, but she had that insight to go, this is going to be confusing for people. And I thought, oh, that makes sense, because I love everyone, right? But, and then every so often, some troll or whatever would draw me out, and I'd lose my mind, and I give them the business, And one guy was like, "Oh, this from the guy that loves everyone." Right? And my response to him was, do I look like a simp?
Yeah.
You let me know that I'm not making a difference for you and you don't give a fuck about me.
Yeah.
And so now you were my mortal fucking enemy.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I can love a stranger.
Yeah.
But once you try to attack my ness, for lack of a better term, like the thing that is the essence
most
of
sacred
me,
of you.
like once you try to attack that, like fuck you. Like I don't, I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
About I'm never gonna convert you.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't have to listen. You don't have to watch.
Have to, right?
You don't have to be a fan.
And I get it, right? So there, and my joke is like, look, bro, I don't know if your mother held you too much when you were a baby or too little. I don't know what makes you this way, where you are scrolling through the internet and see some random Joe telling people that he loves them and encouraging them not to have the fate that his brother did that killed himself. And you see that and go, fuck that.
Yeah.
I have to destroy whatever this
Yeah.
is. Whatever that thing is
Or
that
even
you have.
comment on that. Like,
Whatever that is. I'm like, I can't help you. Like, see a counselor or something. I don't know, but what I've learned is that you don't build a thing for everyone. People are looking for things. And, the field of dreams, if you build it, they will come. Build the thing that resonates with your heart.
yeah.
And if you build it, the people that also resonates with, they'll come. They'll come along. But it's not going to be everyone.
No.
But going through that process, especially in the beginning, because the first people that get exposed to your message are the people that are already part of your circle.
Yeah.
And those are the people, unfortunately, that are most likely to reject your message because they think that you're saying something about them in your message.
Yeah.
Because they feel like you're making yourself an authority, which makes them not an authority. And those thoughts never crossed my mind. None of that ever crossed my mind.
Until you said that, I would have never thought of that.
But, I mean, there are people who, quite honestly, were kind of celebrities to me.
Yeah.
That I can't talk with anymore. That I can't be friends with anymore. That talk negatively about me to anyone who will listen. And I don't fully understand it, but I'm trying to get to a place where I can accept that as part of the process and go, okay, how many private messages did that person receive from somebody who decided not to blow their brains out because of what you put out into the world?
Yeah.
I'm guessing that the answer is zero.
Zero, for sure.
Right? And so I said that the other day to because I have a leadership team for Bourbon Real Talk Community, and somebody was, being negative and all that. And I said that to the team. I said, how many people do you think that individual has stopped from blowing their brains out? I think it's zero.
It's powerful.
And I don't know how many people we have stopped from killing themselves, but I know it's not zero.
Yeah, one's enough.
Right? Because I've gotten private messages from people who are too embarrassed to go public.
Yeah.
That have shared that information with me. And I got to believe that if there are people out there that have pressed through that social thing that we have to not talk about our mental health issues as men. And I've never received a message from a woman. All of the messages of people who were contemplating suicide who decided not to do it because of the community that I built or the message that I presented were all men. And when I think about that, I got to think, Well, how many didn't press past the social norm to keep these things to yourself?
Yeah.
There has to be more people out there that this has made a difference to, right?
Yeah. There's a lot that don't hit send.
That don't hit send. And so, you know, and that's why I make a really big deal when people come to me and they say, I want to start a podcast or I want to start my own business. I tell them, what is your why? You better have a big one, because I promise you, before you get to the success that you're imagining in this new venture, you're going to get so much negative feedback that you literally have to be at a place where your sanity could be questioned to keep going. Because all of the data is going to tell you that you are on the wrong path. All of it. Your family. There's not a single family member that supported me in what I'm doing in the beginning. Not my wife, not my father, not my mother. No one. Everyone thought I was crazy. And I said, you'll see.
Damn, that's a tough place to be, man. That sucks. But yeah, kudos to you.
And now look,
Yeah.
right? I mean, every day I get a message from somebody that tells me that I encourage them.
Yeah.
Not every day, but I get multiple some days. So,
Yeah.
I get,
It averages out.
it averages out, right? Like,
Yeah.
I get a message probably every day from somebody that said, I was in a dark place. You helped me get through a dark time. You know, all that stuff. And that was my mission and my vision. But also, it can make money too.
Yeah.
And take care of my family, right? I mean, I have misfortune like everyone else, and now I'm getting to a place where I might be able to make enough money to take care of me and my family, and fuck all the dumb shit, right?
Yeah.
Like if something bad happens, cool,
Yeah.
right? You can't touch me, right? I mean, I'm not there yet, but I'm getting closer.
Well, you're also teaching your kids. I saw your kids just wanting a high recognition of the little young entrepreneurs they're becoming too. And I know your wife really has helped drive that too.
Oh, for
of
sure.
Teaching them these things and helping them find their place and teaching these basic concepts.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely amazing. I mean, maybe you could speak a little bit about that too, like in how you guys approach that, because I'm sure they want to be involved. They see you guys doing all these things, especially you and Lindsay being involved and stuff. That like she now helps full time, I think, pretty much with like all your different projects, or at least several of them, to some degree, whether support or actually physically being involved and helping with that. And I think there's something to be said for that and what you guys are putting out there and teaching them, because you're not just like, it's not the family just says, okay, yeah, we're doing good, here you go. Like both your kids were coming up the age of getting their driver's license, cars, stuff like that, and you guys help show them and help find a way to start their own businesses.
Yep. So, the backstory was, and I don't mean to talk negatively about my wife Lindsay, but there was a time that she didn't see it.
Right.
But through my perseverance and pushing through, she did see it.
Yeah.
And she has skills that I don't have.
Yeah.
I am a good enough is good enough guy. Right? So when I want to sell a product, I source it and I put it in shitty packaging and I ship it out to the customer. Right? And she's like, no, that's not what we do. We do everything with
We wouldn't do that in the colony,
right.
Damn it, Randy.
The mean streets of the colony, right? So she comes in and she like standardizes all of the processes. She takes over sourcing. She figures out how to find everything that we need.
She finds some really cool stuff, by the way.
Really cool stuff.
I thought about bringing some of that up here, but I didn't want to like barrage the table with some of the stuff I have.
I bring her a thing and I'm like, find me this, and then she does, and I'm like, put my logo on it, and she's like this, and I'm like, yes, right? she's crushing it. And so, there was a point where she didn't work. She stayed at home with the kids, but once the kids started going to school, and we had a house cleaner, and I'm the cook in the family, and I bought the groceries, and we were sending our laundry out to a service and all that stuff. At some point I was like, okay, what do you want to do? You know? And she went to school. She became an esthetician, went to laser school, became a laser technician, and went to work. And I mean, I'm sure there's not a ton of women listening to this podcast.
You'd be amazed. Like, actually, we have a pretty good mix.
Surprised.
Do you?
You see our demographics. Our demographics are right there.
Right there. Okay. So if you're a woman, just know that the laser industry and aesthetics in general is a racket, and there's licensing that you have to be able to do these things. But if you have a medical doctor that's involved with your practice, people who are untrained can operate under the doctor's license. And as a result, all the regulatory authorities that are over those groups have no power. Only the medical board has power, and the medical board doesn't give a shit about a doctor who's lasering people that he's not supposed to, because they're worried about the dude that's paralyzing people during surgeries because he doesn't know how to do spine
They don't
surgery.
care that you burnt some dude's asshole.
Right, exactly. And so through this process, my wife is working for a company. They're asking her to do all of these things that are absolutely illegal. All of their equipment's illegal. It's not even supposed to be in the United States. And when she ended up leaving that organization, we had the opportunity for her to take over full time, and work for the podcast and the business and the merch company that we have now, because we sell whiskey, related merchandise. And the kids were seeing all of this play out. And my daughter came to me when she was 15, and she's 18 now, and she said, "I don't want you guys to buy my car. I want to buy my own car." And we said, okay, what do you want to do? She's like, I want to start a business. And at the time, I was developing the whiskey sensory kit that I created, the whiskey aroma kit.
That's amazing, by the way. So, quick little side note, keep your train of thought. But my nose has been broken so many times that when I sit here and even if it's a proper Glen, it's either going to hit me or it's not. I've had 2 reconstructions on my nose. My sense of smell, even pre-COVID, was shit, basically. So I have to rely way more on other senses than I do smell. But your sensory kit, that's the where you can smell these things, and I did a lot of research. You have probably the best one, and that's got the most and the most common things that there is out there. And for the most fair price, I will say, too, if you really go do your research. So any of you that are looking to be able to do that better or further your bourbon journey, I highly recommend that you check out Bourbon Real Talk. He's got a lot of stuff on there, but go ahead. I just wanted to throw that out there a little bit. That sensory kit sits on my bar. I get asked about it every time people come to my house and are walking around my bar. Once they get done looking at the wall, they immediately are looking over there, and it's got my barrel, and then right next to it is a sensory kit, and they're like, what the hell is that? And I'm like, it helps me because there's a lot of times, and it's not as often now that I'll grab a bottle and I'm just like, what is it that I really am enjoying about this? Taste or smell, you're trying to break down things why is this place getting this note or whatever? It's not bananas, but anyways, it's, you got to find some of those things, and it's helped me because there's been things that I haven't picked out before. There's very common things in bourbon that stand out real quickly. Dill pickle, banana, medicinal cherry, just to name 3 right off the bat, and leather. Those things are really easy. But when you get something And I introduced this to a couple guys just Sunday that came over to my house. I don't know if you've tried this or not yet. I'm sure you probably have, but the Leopold Brothers 3-chamber still rye. It's one of my favorites. I think I brought you a sample one time when I came over.
Yeah.
And it's got, I mean, it's just every time, and it opens up more and more, and it's like every time I taste it, I taste something completely different. And I've had to go through and really do that. And it's one of the only things that really helps me break that stuff down.
Yeah. Well, and that was my intent. I used to collect wine before I got into whiskey. I had a wine aroma kit. I trained my palate with it. And people started asking me when I do whiskey reviews, like, how do you identify the individual flavors? And I was like, well, I have this wine aroma kit. And then I thought, like, you know what, I'll just go find a whiskey aroma kit, and then I'll send them the link. And I went to go look for one. There wasn't one that was good. Like,
no, they're terrible.
There was one that had, you know, a ton of sense in it, but most of them were associated with Scotch, so there wasn't really one for American whiskey. And the one that I could find that was for bourbon had corn, rye, which are in almost every single bourbon.
Yeah, nothing.
And cauliflower.
Yeah.
What does cauliflower taste like? Whatever you season it with. I swear to God, if I was watching your bourbon whiskey review and you told me that you were detecting cauliflower, I will punch you in the jejunum. Like, no.
And I'm not drinking that either.
Not allowed. And I was like, why is there not a good one for American whiskey? And my wife had gone to aesthetic school, and she was taking some cosmetic formulation classes. And I said, like, hey, what if you, like, help me make this aroma kit? So she starts sourcing fragrance oils for me to sample. And we probably went through 350 or 400 fragrance oil samples to find the 36 that are now in the kit. But during this time frame, my daughter says she wants to start her own business. And we have all these fragrance oils all over the house. And my daughter said, what if I started a candle company? Because we've already got all these fragrance oils and all this stuff. And my wife was like, all right. So she started to do the research, figured out what kind of wax was best.
When he says research, he means like a nuclear scientist attacked making a candle. Just for any of you that do not know, Lindsay, I guarantee you it was on a nuclear level.
Months of just shit all over the counter.
So let me tell you something. My wife started a candle company years and years ago. I had to literally section off part of the house because people don't understand paraffin wax. You know the terms of throw, scents. You had to test. You had to test all the yes. Yeah. When I say shit all over the house, we almost got arrested because UPS dropped a bag of wax and it looks like flakes, and they thought we were drug dealers. Literally, I had the nosy lady next door.
Sullivan garage, dude.
I'm just gonna go on record and say that was racist
plant.
because I have a lot of weird shit delivered to my house and no one has ever gotten upset about.
We were literally the only black family in a 5-mile radius in the neighborhood I lived in, and we had the biggest house. So I was in radio at the time. So when you have a black family in Millard, Nebraska, and you're driving the first. I had a 2007 Avalanche. That's the first body style that they redid it on 24s. Had a BMW 760. Had an M3, and I had a truck. Yeah, we were drug dealers all day long. Yeah, but the candle game.
Profiled.
Oh, crazy. Mrs. Kravitz lived next door. If you don't know who Mrs. Kravitz is, you're not old enough. But the candle game.
I know who Biggie Smalls is now.
Lord. The candle game was serious. That is a lot, very intuitive. That's a lot.
And my wife's a perfectionist. And what people don't realize is
so is he.
I thought I was, but I figured out I wasn't. Okay?
No, I mean you like borderline. Like there's a line between perfection and OCD, and you and I ride that line.
No. I define myself as a driver. My wife is a perfectionist. So for me, if I can't reach perfection, I'm going to get as close as I can, but I'm still going to drive forward.
Yeah.
Not Lindsay.
Yeah.
If she can't get to perfection, she won't move from where she's at.
Yeah.
And so what y'all don't know, all of y'all out there, because you said you got a lot of female viewers, and men buy candles too. Bed Bath & Beyond is trying to kill you for profit.
Yes.
Okay? And the way they do it is they put a wick in their candle that's way too hot, so it burns off the candle real fast.
Yep.
So that you'll buy more candles. And it doesn't happen often, but every so often the candle explodes and burns the house down and kills you and your family. And they have insurance for that, and they don't give a shit about that. So they're totally okay with killing you just so long as they can sell more candles. Now, my wife will rack her brain for 6 months, have weeks at a time that she and I can't even talk because she's so frustrated we can't even get along, because she's trying to figure out the new wick for this new jar, right? and she went through all of that process to get the candles right and the wicks right for my daughter's candle company. And we launched, and we made my daughter do shows on the weekends and go and hawk those candles and all that stuff. And she ended up making enough money. And we helped. I mean, but she paid more than anyone else, but my parents helped and we helped, and she paid cash for her car. And her car is worth more than mine. I'm not gonna lie. And she did that. But the candle company is named after my daughter and my son. So once my daughter got her candle or her car, we're like, hey son, you hawk candles now.
Yeah.
And so now he's doing the shows and he's doing all that stuff to try and get his car.
I never in my life thought I would meet another man that can understand the candle making journey. I mean, we did it for 10 years. And
Lindsay thinks she's not even interesting. So, I mean,
if our wives met, it's a wrap.
Yeah. Oh, it's a wrap.
Oh, no, they can't. Because I don't need her to start doing that shit again. No, she does.
She makes whole custom blankets.
And, she does other stuff. And when I say man, that's why I have trucks. We had a trailer going to all the craft shows and traveling around, and the customers we had. And people don't understand, every scent can't be a candle scent. You just can't grab anything and throw it in the batch because of the chemical compound.
You got to test the wick and the wax with that scent.
And you got to test how long, and you got to time it to see how long it burns.
Yeah.
You got to weigh it. You got to...
Everything.
Too much.
Yeah. And so anytime somebody's like, hey, can I get your empty whiskey bottles? Because I'm going to turn them into candles. I'm like, you can kill somebody. Because I know for sure you're not doing the testing you need to do on this wick to know whether or not this wick is going to cause this.
If you want to make a lamp or an ashtray, or you want to melt it, cool, you can have the bottle.
Yeah. So that's kind of the story with the kids. And it's helped to kind of pass on that entrepreneur gene. You know? Yeah. But we also made our daughter get a job at a major retailer, because it's like, you may not ever work for anybody full time. After you get out of college, maybe you start your own business right off the rip. I'm here to support you.
But you need that experience.
But I want you to have that experience, because you're going to have employees.
And go wait tables.
Right? You're going to have employees you're that experience for them.
Yeah.
And I want you to know what it's like.
Yeah.
Right? And so we did have her go out and work retail and deal with the Karens that, we're complaining about the coupons and how the refunds worked and all that stuff. But, we're trying to raise well-rounded kids. We may have gone too hard in the paint and making my daughter too prickly, a little too strong, But I think it's going to work out in the end.
I think so. You got two really good kids.
She seems to be impervious to fuckboys, which, that's the goal.
Yeah, that's why he stays in that gym steady.
Right.
Yeah. Every time I see Randy, I told you I want to go do push-ups.
I know. When he walked in, you're like, I need to go do some push-ups. Randy just walked in looking all swollen shit. Damn.
So funny story. So my daughter is 15 at the time. I don't think she's 16 yet. One of her best friends, 16, she got a boyfriend. And they want to go get ice cream. Boyfriend's driving. I say, fine. Back then, my wife and I watched TV at night without the kid. Now, we all get together as a family. So we watch family-friendly stuff that's age-appropriate for our kids. But back then, we'd watch stuff like Game of Thrones and, whatnot, where the kids weren't in the room. And so we're sitting there watching TV, and I'm drinking whiskey as one does. And I hear a noise on the front porch, and it's my daughter who screams. So immediately, I think, date rape, time to kill. Also, I hate clothes. I don't like wearing a lot of clothes. I'm always hot. And so I'm shirtless, wearing
Draws.
shorts. I've got shorts on over my underwear, but I got nothing else on. I got shorts and underwear on, that's it. I'm shirtless. And I've been drinking. And my daughter screamed on the porch. So I go stomping out of the house like a fucking gorilla who's prepared to kill.
Go to war.
And I open up the door and I walk past my daughter looking for the threat. And I'm like, you know, and she's like, no, Daddy, there was a spider. And there's a boy that had started to walk towards the front porch from the vehicle, but I'm still in kill mode.
Yeah.
Like, for sure. And I have murder in my eyes, and he can see it.
Yeah.
And he is a small, like, 16 or 17-year-old boy, and I am me, and angry and puffed up. And his eyes are the size of saucers, and I'm like, and I just turn around and walk inside because I couldn't turn it off. You know what I mean? And I think that fucked the whole thing up. Like, I don't like.
It saved you until college.
Right. And so
the greatest worst thing that happened.
Right. And so my daughter's like not had a serious boyfriend or anything like that. Like,
Dad, the guys won't talk to me because they've all heard the story.
Right. And I'm like, did I, you know? And then my wife was like, I know you think that's cool, but now our daughter's gonna have her first date in college when we're not there to be there for her, right? And I'm like, that's probably not a good look.
Yeah.
I'm like, we still have time. There's some time left in the semester. Maybe she'll meet a nice boy. I promise I won't eat him. You know, it's gonna be good.
So there was no proms, no homecomings, none of that?
No, I mean, she went to prom last year, but she went with all of her girlfriends. She's had a couple of what I would consider dates where boys ask her to go eat, you know, and stuff like that. And I asked her about it. One boy, and I mean, like, I don't want to be, but I was kind of impressed with his play. So he...
I gotta hear this story.
He asked her to go... I think it was ice cream. He asked her to go get ice cream, and she said no. And then later that day, he posted on his Instagram getting ice cream with another girl. And she told me about it, and I was like, hey, I'm mad, but I kind of respect that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and I was like, how'd it make you feel? And she's like, I didn't like it. And I was like, that's what he was going for, right? Like,
I can't wait to the prom or the homecoming where it's like you and Philip hanging out at the house.
No.
And the date shows up.
Philip
like,
cannot be there.
Oh, I think it would be a great idea.
Bad Boys too?
Oh, man, like legit. Like, and it's so funny because this blew my mind, and I had to hear this story because, mind you, I moved to Texas in 96, so I started at the colony my junior year. Randy's graduating. My best friend is like a year younger than me, and that's Marcus. And he's one of my two best friends from the colony, Marcus and Jacob. And Marcus has an older brother that had already graduated before I even got there, and he's got two little brothers. And at the time, I mean, they were in elementary school, Philip and Steven. And it's just funny that, you know, so Lindsay was like the same grade as me. Maybe she was a year older than me, I think. Or are we the same? Did she graduate in 98?
No, she's
97. 97, yeah. So she graduated a year before me. And, you know, I knew Lindsay because of Marcus because they were in choir together. And Lindsay always talked about, oh, my boyfriend. Boyfriend? Who? We don't ever see this guy.
Sadly, the boyfriend she was talking about was not me.
Yeah, but like we hear this, and then it's like, her and Randy, and it's like I kept hearing this guy Randy, and this and that, and Marcus tell me like, oh, don't mess with Lindsay, blah blah blah, and it was just funny. They had this little choir pact, and it's like, and then all these years go by, and we graduate and stuff, and Marcus has been one of my best friends, and then I lost touch with Marcus for about 7-8 years when he went to Florida and some other things, and then he came back and we got back in touch, and now Philip and Steven are full grown, and I'm like, if you've seen Steven, like, holy shit, it's like Johnny Jr. And then Philip is just like, damn, son.
Yeah.
Like Philip's always been a big boy, but like, Philip comes in and it's like, then I meet you guys and we start talking and we're talking about the colony and stuff like that. And you're like, yeah, my best friends, Phil. I'm like, wait, you're older than me, and Marcus is one of my best friends.
Yeah.
And you're best friends with his little brothers? I was like, wait, you got to tell me the story. And then we meshed that out and like heard all that. And like, that was super interesting to cross and how small the world really is when you get into something like that.
Yeah. And it was the same thing. When I was in college, I found the Lord and I got involved in church. And I became a junior high youth pastor. And the church that I was at had what they called Sidewalk Sunday School that was at Carr Chapman Park where the Robertsons lived. Yeah. And Philip was one of the kids that went, Derek Conley and a handful of others, and they started coming to church there, and I met them and got close with them and stuck with them. Yeah. And, Philip eventually came to work for me, and we were workout partners for years. And, that's how I ended up becoming, best friends with somebody that was way younger than me, that I knew his brother in high school, obviously. Yeah. But yeah, man, it's all about connection and relationship. And, he was a big influence in me deciding to start this podcast because I realized that, there are people all around you that you have completely different worldviews. Yeah. Very simply because you had different experiences growing up.
And the colony is like a melting pot. So
sure,
you get a lot of different views and things. And we grew up in that, so it gives us a lot of different perspectives than some other places, whether you went to Plano, I'm not knocking on any of these other schools or anything like that. Like it's different.
Right.
And I moved every 3 years growing up, so I have a drastically different opinion and view on a lot of that. But so how do you balance all of this, Randy? Like, are you a person that like really like, because I've noticed in, all the great leaders, all the great business people and stuff that I read books on and that I follow, and then, what my routines are personally. Are you a guy that plans out your whole day and really designates time to things? Because you juggle a lot between family and business and personal pursuits.
That's a good question. I am a checkoff list guy. Okay. So I discovered Google Calendar many years ago, and I discovered that you can have an event and you can have a reminder. And so I rely very heavily on reminders so that if you go, hey, Randy, when you get home, can you check to see if you have one of these cigars in your humidor? I will set a reminder, and I know that it's not going to slip through the cracks, and that's the only thing that allows me to sleep at night. And honestly, I don't sleep that well. I have so much going on in my head that I struggle to sleep. But the checkoff list is what makes it all happen. And so every day when I wake up, it is a race to get through as much of the checkoff list as I can. I have not completed my checkoff list in probably 10 years.
Do you write or journal?
I do not.
Okay, this is my pro tip for you. Okay. My eye doctor told me this when I was like 18 or 19, and I'm not going to go into this deeply because we're kind of short on time, but my dad taught Franklin Covey planner for the government. And when I got my first C in high school, I had to fully adapt and take on this Franklin Covey planner bullshit at the time, I thought, but like it dictated my life and helped me so much the first like.
So I was a Franklin Covey planner person.
All right.
And I converted it to my Google Calendar, and I use the reminder system the same way that you use a Franklin Covey. Yeah.
So you get those basic
There are
concepts.
some features that are missing. I wish you could rank your priority items in A, B, and C, and then
One,
you
two,
could
three.
number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I wish you could do that. It doesn't do that.
Yeah.
But if you have a reminder that's too low on your list,
So
you
here's
can
your-
delete it.
Yeah.
And then re-enter it. And if there's like 4 or 5 that are top priority, you can rank them, and then you can delete them and re-add them in the order that you need so they show up in your list. So I'm a Franklin Covey guy. I do that. But you know, I also work more than most people do.
Right. So here's your pro tip for being able to shut your brain off and sleep more at night. Business tried this. It works for him.
Yep.
It's worked for me tremendously. And if I have trouble sleeping, I put myself back in this mode every time, and it helps tremendously. So my eye doctor of all people, and Dr. Malone, great eye doctor, super good dude. He told me, he's like, get a little journal. He's like, oh, call it a diary, call it a journal, call it whatever you want that makes you feel good about it. Get a notebook, get a pen and pad, and before you go to bed, 15, 20 minutes before you go to bed, let's just start out with giving yourself 15 minutes. He's like, start writing. Write whatever is on your mind. If it's writing down the things that you did not accomplish in the day off your checklist, if it's things you're thinking about for tomorrow, things you want to do in the future, things, just whatever, write. And cut yourself off at 15 minutes. But if you feel impelled to write more, write more. He's like, it'll start creating this habit. And he's like, as soon as you take that off your brain and put it on paper, I promise you're going to start sleeping better. And I started doing this. And man, if you see at times I'm having trouble in my life sleeping, I will go do this. Like, I keep it. I mean, like, I've got 4 or 5 of these that like are one's by my bed, one's at my office, one's in my briefcase. I carry them around with me. Like, they're scatterbrained because it's like there's 4 different notebooks.
It's just random thoughts.
I just pick up, but like I can write and just get it off my brain, and I'm not shitting you. Like, getting it off of your brain, physically, pen to paper, it'll help.
My brain is like bees buzzing in a coffee can when I lay down in the night and you can't figure it out. And I tried that. Just started writing it all out, and my ass fell asleep.
Yeah, it's
And-
like reading a book.
Because I do the same thing, a to-do list every day, and when I don't get done, I transfer it to the next day and add another 18 things to it, and it never stops. But the biggest challenge, I think, is how do you prioritize? Like, for me, I spin 18 plates, and I feel I'm not making any headway or making any money at these 18 plates, so I just want 3. Just give me 3 plates I can focus everything in on, and it never ends up that way. You just gotta, like, it goes back to what we said earlier, finding your purpose, finding your why. And that's, you know.
Well, and there's an amazing thing you can do too, and I learned this from Brandon Frakes. He does this like crazy ass, and his is so much more productive and organized than mine is. But he does like a year in review where he takes a day or 2 at the end of the year, and he goes through all of his like notes and everything that he journals, writes, puts into his Remarkable or whatever it is that he uses. And he does this self-reflection where for a day he just kind of like goes through, analyzes it, and then he pulls data out of that, and then he sets the page and the tone for the next year. Like, I do not go that in depth by any means. But what I do try to do at the end of the year is take a day, whether it's 4, 6 hours, whatever, and I just kind of thumb through the book, and, you know, I take notes, or, I'll just see things, and I kind of reread what I did, and it's like, it gives you a sense of accomplishment because you can kind of go through there and see what you did accomplish. what you didn't accomplish, what you want to move forward, and you think about just in your current life, like, okay, where does this need to adapt, evolve, move a different direction, and you can do that in that manner just by reviewing those notes. Because it was crazy when I started this podcast. I went back and looked at a note when it hit me after I did the couple podcasts with the Frakes. I had been trying to do a blog and all this other stuff, but I was too analytical of my own writing. So I kept scrapping things. It's like it was never good enough to put out in the public.
That's the difference between me and you. I'm not a perfectionist. Good enough is good enough. I put it out there. And somebody's like...
But I did that for a while. But then I was like over analytical of what I put out. And then it was like, I got to a point where I was like, what you'd call writer's block or whatever. Like, I kind of got to where I just wouldn't put it out. Like, I just scrap. I'd write, refine it, spend hours on this, and then all of a sudden I'd be sitting there and I'd be like, okay, this is final draft. Yeah, no, like that's not what I want to put out. And then like the blog just died. And then I started doing the podcast, and I did 2 like back to back within a month. And I was like, I can do this. I can talk in front of a camera. If I can just talk and share, way easier, way better for me. And I went back and looked at my journals and my notes, and kind of went through it, and it's like, wow, holy shit, this kind of idea started like 5-6 years ago. It just took me being exposed to these things and trying these things and failing and not seeing it to get to this point that I was just like, okay, this is the avenue. Let's go all in on this avenue.
Right.
And just go for it and let it become whatever it becomes.
Right.
So I highly recommend that for anybody that has trouble sleeping. Like, literally, like, just empty your brain on a piece of paper with pen. And
so I'm going to answer your question because you asked how I get it all done. The abridged version is humans don't crave success. Humans crave progress. And I'm going to finish that thought when I get back from going to the bathroom because I drink a lot of water.
He said he was going to go.
He said he was going to do it. So you guys get a little Biz and Garrett for a minute or two here.
All right, so while we're waiting on Randy to come back, do we have some very interesting guests upcoming in season 2? You don't want to let the cat out the bag, or maybe you do.
All right. I mean, if you're going to make me, if Biz is going to throw it up here, we have, I'm starting with tonight, I'm super excited about this season. Like, getting Randy on here was a goal of mine. Randy's given me a lot of advice. He's a good friend. And I felt like people would really enjoy hearing Randy's messages and what Randy has to say. But coming up, like next week, we have Michael Leto. Mike is somebody I've had to talk to and convince to come on the show. Mike is like that middleman between a sports agent and a businessman. And he takes and teaches these young athletes how to do business, how to create a brand, how to do lots of things. And I'm super excited to have him on the show next week. He's going to be coming straight out of the combine with some of his NFL players.
Off the road.
Like he lands that morning and is coming in here that night to do the podcast because I've literally hounded the shit out of him to do it. So he's coming in here. The week after that, we have Baptiste, and Baptiste is going to be here, and Baptiste's story and what this guy does, he's like the French redneck that just showed up in Texas and is a YouTube phenom in France.
Holds the bench press record in France.
Bench press record in France. And
I was with him yesterday for 8 hours filming for his YouTube channel.
Dude, I don't know how you do that shit.
I don't either, because I was covered in cow shit and horse muck when I came home. We vaccinated 40 head of cattle. If you ever watched 1883 or 1923,
yeah.
If you seen it, There's a guy
No,
on there.
I watched Yellowstone. I haven't finished
I ain't
Yellowstone.
watched- no,
I refuse
I like
to watch
the
the
prequels better.
others.
But these are the
until we
people
get
that provide the cattle and actually feed the cast. Taylor Sheridan buys his meat from the guy we hung out with yesterday. Like, and I was there vaccinating cows and checking teeth for age and all this. It took me all night to clean this camera up. I tell you like that. It was, man.
I mean, it's going to be interesting stuff. But now that we got Randy back.
All right, sorry about that. I've not been drinking during the week as much because, you know, health and things.
Me either. I got back into a workout program. I'm going to give a little shout out to Alex Shaw.
Yeah.
I started the whiskey weight loss program basically 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago was my onboarding. Last week was my first full week. This is my second week. Getting back into that routine of being a 5 a.m.er at the gym and getting my workouts in, being a little more cognizant of what I eat and drink and put in my body. Because honestly, I take pictures with these guests after every show, and I'm like, God, I've turned into a fat ass. And it's like, you know, like this week's gonna be terrible because I got super jacked Randy over here, you know.
Oh no, I'm
Or
Suck
I've
it
got,
in. Suck it in.
Kid
Shoulders back.
Hamlin, you know, who looks like he's doing a GQ magazine every time he goes out in public.
That's
you know,
fair.
It's like when you're around all these guys, and it's like, holy shit, I'm letting myself slide. Like I gotta do something here. But I mean, you gave me an excuse this week. I have so many open bottles at my house. I've stopped opening bottles until a certain amount of bottles are killed with guests and friends coming over. And I've had these two bottles that are Someone Say Whiskey Picks, and they're two of my favorites. One used to be a like hidden gem secret of mine until you assholes went and did a barrel pick with them. And now the whole damn world in Texas knows about it. Not
Everyone
real.
buy Frey Ranch whiskey.
Yeah, Frey Ranch is the shit. I really like the rye. I'm really glad you didn't do a rye pick, but I wish you'd done a rye pick because I really love their rye, and they keep a lot of their rye for distillery-only releases. So I'm just saying. And then one of my good friends is also the guy that reps Castle and Key, and I've had that in my locker for a while, and it's something I really enjoy. And I have bottles open of both of these, but these are both Someone Say Whiskey Picks that you guys see here that we're drinking on tonight. And I used Randall coming on my show to, you know, justify opening these bottles, even though I haven't obtained my goal of killing a couple other bottles to bring these out and open them up. But, you know, what do you open for the guy that has pours at his house and opens his house up to everybody and has a bourbon wall? As much as you guys that actually have seen my bourbon wall give me shit, my wall does not hold a candle to this man's wall. And he built his whole wall his damn self. I designed my wall, but I had other people, because I'm in construction, build my wall. This man physically built his wall himself, and it is unbelievable.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I thank you for sharing these pours with me. I loved both of these picks. I think both were a first for Texas.
Yeah, that's the first single barrel for Texas.
The first single barrel from
And
Castle and
same
Key.
thing for Frey Ranch.
I think it's the same for Frey Ranch. I actually, flew to Nevada, met Colby Frey, and we did the pick there in person. One of
Jeep.
the most interesting, most respectable distilleries in the United States.
Yeah, they do everything. Like, they are a farm first, like a family traditional farm. They grow all their own crops, all their own grains.
I mean, you guys may not understand this, but like your favorite distillery, they don't know shit about
Farming.
No. This individual not only grows all of his own grain, but there's a process that you have to put one of the grains through before it can be used in the fermentation process.
Yeah.
And he built his own equipment to put that grain through that process, and almost nobody does it in the United States.
Yeah.
Which is the malting process for barley. So Frey Ranch is great. But to go back to your original question about, how do I have time to get it all done? The short answer is I don't.
But you balance it so well. I mean, you've got unallocated out there with Someone Say Whiskey. You've got the Prideful Goat, and I want to give you a little congrats. I mean, as your friend, congrats.
Thank you.
You're Prideful Goat. Batch.
Which one, the bourbon or the rye?
The rye's my favorite, but I'm a rye guy.
All right.
But both of them are phenomenal, and I'm so glad this didn't happen. But your stuff just ranked in the top 50, 2 bottles in the top 50 with Fred Minnick. That's pretty damn huge for a non-distiller producer out of Texas, because most, honestly, in my personal humble opinion, most Texas whiskey sucks. I'm an Iron Root fan, but I don't like a lot of stuff out of Texas, but you guys have sourced a lot of stuff and bottled, and what you guys are doing is amazing. I actually, because I showed up at the right place at the right time, and I told you guys I didn't chase allocated my first 2 years. My bar mainly consists of chasing craft distillers because I found more interest in trying new and different things than chasing the Blantons and, the Buffalo Trace, highly allocated stuff. Like, yes, I have some of that stuff, but I don't chase it. That's been good fortune of me being a loyal patron to several liquor stores and, being a part of the game, being a part of the industry. I did not chase that stuff. So my bar is very eclectic as far as what I have out and have open. It's different than most, but I have a lot of stuff that a lot of people have never tried because I don't just go in, and if what I'm looking for is not there, I guarantee you I can't walk into a liquor store and not buy something. Like, I'm going to buy something. Even if it's the most random ass bottle that I have no idea anything about it, or I'll talk to the staff and be like, what's new in here? What are you recommending? What's something you've tried that nobody knows about? That's where I really built a relationship with Spirits French Lick. I got into that for a while, and, I love Spirits French Lick. It's something I'm very, fond of, and it's so different. Mm-hmm. It's actually the first time I got banned or shut off with Someone Say Whiskey for a little while, because Ryan Wester, when I selectively donated samples of every French Lick bottle I had, told me he was jokingly, I mean, we're good friends, but that doesn't necessarily fly in Someone Say Whiskey, told me he was going to drain pour it. And I said, I'll punch you in the throat if you drain pour all this without trying it. And I literally got banned for 30 days. First and only time I've been banned for anything on Facebook. But
for the record, we didn't do that. Facebook did that.
Yeah, I know you didn't. But, at the time when you're first learning this, because, do a podcast. You think you know about social media? You don't know shit. Start trying to do a business and learn about it. There's a reason people have degrees in social media. Yeah. Like, it's literally insane. Like, you think you know, you have no idea, and it's way more complicated than you could possibly explain, even in an entire podcast. We could just talk about social media for 2 hours, and we would barely, scratch the surface.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely insane. So you guys know, I mean, those are both Someone Say Whiskey picks. Man, out of all the Castle Keys I've had, this is super unique. I mean, I can't get away from the Frey Ranch, though. It's so damn good.
So good.
So good. All right, so we're at the end of the episode. I am going to let you do your sign-off, but you cannot use your sign-off in any way, shape, or form to answer these next 2 questions.
All right.
And if you've watched any of these shows, you kind of know what's about to come. But I'm going to guess, I'm going to get a drop a good bomb on you. And every answer that has come from these 2 questions has been absolutely amazing. Biz is working on the reels. We will be dropping those separately. So all of you can listen to those and reflect on those, because these are what I like to call the golden nuggets of this show.
All right.
Like, these are little nuggets that everybody can apply to their life and or contemplate, and they inspire a lot. They teach you a lot. So, first question. If, God forbid, and I'm not wishing any ill will on anybody here, but like, God forbid you had one message you could leave your son and daughter today, what would that last message, you could leave them one piece of advice right now, and it's the last piece of advice they would ever get from you. What would that piece of advice be?
Wow. That's pretty deep. Last piece of advice. I would want to say something that guided them towards a partner in life that was going to help them as they work towards their purpose. Like, that's the one thing that I've observed is I've experienced various levels of success and different things that I've worked on. I've got to know other, people that are working towards their goals. Who you're doing that with makes a big difference.
For sure.
And, I've seen people who have been in a relationship with somebody who was indisputably very physically attractive, and the whole thing fell apart.
Yeah.
Everybody on the outside is like, oh, like, look at this. This is a goal.
It's a trophy wife.
Right? But that's not it, right? Like, if I could bestow one thing on my kids, it would be that they would end up with a partner that the two of them built each other up. And I don't know what words I would say to convey that message to them or what I'd say to them to help them to be able to make that decision. But life is hard. It's filled with disappointments and failures and evidence that you're on the wrong track and things that are going to convince you to give up and to cede your authority to someone else and let somebody else make those decisions for you and trade your future for stability because somebody's willing to give you an amount of money that you can subsist on so that you don't have to face the trials and the difficulties and all that stuff. And if I could pick one thing for my kids, it would be that they would find somebody that is willing to go through that process with them and to build them up and help them to find the greatest version of themselves. Because that's the only thing that really matters, is that you're better than you were yesterday. It's the only thing that really matters.
Yeah.
Is that you want to progress every day to be the best version of who you are.
You might have fallen or failed the day before, but you learned and you moved forward and did something else.
Today I'm closer to becoming the best version of myself than I was yesterday. And if you have a day that's not that way, that day was a fail, and today's a new day. And I would want my kids to have a partner in life that would help them towards that goal.
And support that. I absolutely agree. That's what it's about right there. That's absolute excellence. All right. The last and final thing is you get to give us your 2 cents. And it can be 2 cents about anything. It can be 2 cents of something I didn't ask you, something you wanted to say today, something that this show inspired you to say, something that you just feel compelled to say. Can't go to your sign off. I'm still going to let you do that. But It can just be something you just really feel you would like to say, or a message you would like to give, or something you would just like to share with the listeners.
Can I cry?
Sure. I know you've had me on the verge like twice tonight.
All right. So I'll go back to my point when you're asking me about managing time. And that is, everyone gets to see the magical part of people's lives on social media.
Yep.
And the reason why is because people don't post the bad things. And when they do, it's socially unacceptable. You only get to see the highlight reel. And the truth is that humans don't crave success. You think you do. You see somebody that has the thing that you want, they live a life that you wish that you could live and all that stuff. And if I walked into your life right now and I gave it all to you, you would be miserable. Just like all the rich kids that end up addicted to heroin and drugs and they throw their lives away. They don't have to work for anything. They have all the trappings of life that you can imagine. What we really crave is progress and a feeling that we did something today that made a difference. And that is kind of a thing that I've realized. I've been in a dark place. I've had my best efforts be destroyed by outside forces, outside of my control. This last year, a company that I've been building since 2015, the whole thing got imploded by a greedy asshole that if he had just waited a little bit, he could have had everything that he wanted, but instead he decided that he was going to use the opportunity to embezzle money so that he could play a role today that could have been his for eternity in 2 to 3 years, but he wouldn't wait. And it destroyed, in some ways, my reputation. It hurt people who trusted in me and all of this stuff. And it took me to a very, very dark place. So dark, I can't even tell you about it. The darkest place.
I understand.
Okay? But the thing that brought me out of it was focusing on the next right thing. The next thing to do that is good, that is progress. And so I might wake up one day and have 50 things to do. And there is no day that I can do 50 things. But there are 10 things that if I don't do them, bad things start happening right now. And if I can do those 10 things and it moves the needle, the other 40 things don't matter as much. And so
Absolutely.
for me, what I would want people to know out there is that your only objective every day is to end the day better than you started it. Be a better version of yourself at the end of the day than you were when you woke up. And that is progress. And focus on those things. Because if you don't, and you lose hope, then the worst is possible. And I don't want that for anyone. I believe that every single individual that has ever been born was put here with a purpose, and that you could have accomplished that purpose despite your circumstances and the difficulties that stood in the way and all of those things that cause people to get derailed and to give up hope and to not pursue things. You know, I've met people that have gone through difficult times and they struggle and they lose hope. Don't. You're like flowing water. Life can put a dam in front of you. You're just going to make a fucking lake. And then you'll overflow the dam, or you'll find another path to move forward. And that's life. And don't lose hope. And keep pushing forward and find the joy and the motivation that you need in the small successes. Because you don't move mountains in one day. But if you can learn to take that one bucket of dirt when you're trying to move that mountain and see it moved and go, I made progress, then you can stay the course and you can press through and you can become the best version of yourself. And that is the purpose of life. And everything else is in alignment with that. You want a partner that helps you do that. You want to build your kids so that they can pursue that. Everything about life is about that. But be the best version of yourself, and don't lose hope. And when you struggle, focus on the small bits of progress, no matter how small, that pushed you closer towards that, and you can pull yourself out of those dark times.
Absolutely, brother. That was fucking epic. That might be the best one that's ever been dropped on here. And
there's a sign off?
Man, yeah. I'm just gonna say, man, I love you, brother.
Wow.
That was fucking passionate. That was deep. That might be the man. I almost don't even have words right now, but hey, man, we'll be back next week. But hey, man, sign us off. And the only way you do it.
Well, part of the reason why I do everything that I do is because my younger brother committed suicide in 2014. He was a military veteran. He was honorably discharged, but because of his injuries, he was, given opioids, and he, was addicted, and his life was off track. And in the aftermath of his death, I was trying to find a way to help people feel a connection to the world around them that my brother had lost, that made it easy for him to say goodbye to this world. And so that's part of the reason why I started my podcast, and I created the whiskey communities that I've created, is because, whiskey brings people together. And I want to use the connected power of whiskey to help you feel like you're part of something, and that there are people who care about you, and they want to see you have a positive future. But during that process, I learned that there are a lot of negative people online, and I don't know what happened to them. I don't know why they're hateful to strangers. But seeing those people be hateful made me realize that if a stranger can hate you online, even though they don't know you, that there's nothing that keeps me from loving you online, even though I don't know you. And that is why I end all my podcasts the same way, and that's this. If you woke up this morning and you were unsure whether or not anyone loved you, just know that I love you. We'll see you next time.
See y'all next time.
On which podcast?
Common Sense, the podcast.
On Common Sense, the podcast.
Thank you, brother. I love you, man.